let me show you how I do oil coolers on NC Miatas. So what I first start with is getting a piece of 1-inch aluminum angle. This is the thicker stuff, I believe it's 1/8 inch thick. I've cut it to where it sits right on top of the mount over here, and it sits right on the mount over here. These are the horn mounts, and I put just an M6 through them, and that's very sturdy as it is. And I'm going to use one of these type oil coolers. So they make these in the smaller version, which is half the width, the medium version, which is about 3/4, and then of course this is the large version. This is the one I use on all the turbo cars, and the small one I just use on everybody else. We're going to mount it such that the lines are able to go 90 degrees and straight down the side right here. And then we're going to get them to run over the sway bar. And back here, if you guys are familiar, I'm very fond of using these MADfabworx perches because they're an all-in-one solution that maintains the stock filter location. So then we're going to run our oil lines from here up to that. It makes sure that the system is fairly simple, but it's also thermostatic. And then for turbo applications, if you have an intercooler, the intercooler sits right here, and it doesn't interfere with the mounting of the oil cooler, as well as it keeps the oil cooler after the intercooler, which is important for cooling dynamics. Gotten out 290 vibrant fittings. That's these guys. Got 260s. Those are in the car right now. Let's go and see how this thing lines up. So we're going to take this in one hand. And like I said, we're going to try to line this up to where this goes right down the side there. So there we go. About right there. I'm going to go ahead and place some marks, drill some holes, so you'll try and get those guys centered up. So I drilled my holes out. These are M8 bolts that go on here. I would like to point out that if you do get one of these style oil coolers, they're always really shallow with the threads. So they're always M8, but you're going to need to get 12 millimeter or less. 12 millimeter pretty much gets you right on the money, and then you can run a little washer on there as well. I also always use red Loctite on these since it goes into a blind hole, so you don't want it backing out, and you definitely don't want to over torque into aluminum. So now that we have that together, let's put it on the car. We got the oil cooler mounted up here. Got my M6s up here and my M8s up here, holding it at the top. You'll notice there are 2 holes at the bottom as well. So those are the same dimensions as the top ones. And what I've done for the larger oil coolers like this one is I'll run an X brace on the bottom, which I'm going to do, just probably not in this video. I run a aluminum flat bar, 1" by 1/8, same stuff that we're running on top, except not the angle version. And I'll run this over to that bolt hole, and then from this bolt hole over to that one, and then where they cross, I'll have them welded together. So that gives us all the structure versus this wobbling. On the smaller oil coolers, it's not as big of a deal, but I would still at least run 1 bar from here to the back, so that way it doesn't have as much wobble. Now you'll notice I'm running the really fat CSF radiator. This is the 42 millimeter thick one. This one's going to give me a little bit of trouble. Normally, I can run both of these lines together over, but because of the way it contorts this lower hose, even though I've cut it, there's still limited space here, so I may not be able to run both lines there. We may have to do 1 over and 1 under. Either way though, it's important that we have these lines very close. Now if you're going to be running stainless steel lines, it's important to protect versus chafing. You can damage your dryer, your AC line, your radiator hose, any of that stuff. If you run the nylon stuff, much less of a risk. So what we're going to take care of now is, I'm going to go get my 10AN line, and I'm going to figure out how much length I need for either of these. Remember that this needs to be the inlet on top always, and the outlet needs to be the lower one. So in order not to do measure thrice cut once type stuff, what I did is we typically just put one end fitting on, and then I'm going to go ahead and run this through, attach it to the side of the motor, and then exactly the length that it comes to right at this fitting is how I'll cut it. So now I've got a whole roll here. Let's go ahead and see how that goes. Okay, I've installed my send line, so that's the port towards the top front on our MADfabworx perch. And so since that's the send line, we're going to put that into the top port. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a mark here. The routing is satisfactory, so I'm going to go ahead and put my mark here, cut that, install this guy, and then we can work on doing the bottom one as well. So if you're trying to copy this exact setup I'm doing here, this line is a 29" on the dot. So I've made this line, we have our 60, we have our 90. Let's go ahead and install it. So let me show you the routing I've done here. Obviously we've got that guy running up and over the sway bar. And when you come from this direction, you'll see the 60 forces it to go around the power steering mechanism. So we won't have any contact over there. Obviously I'll need to tighten these guys down, but at least wanted to demonstrate this is how it's running. So now I'll take care of tightening those down, and then we can make our next line. All right, we got our other 60 degree on the end of our unlimited length piece of hosing. We're gonna go ahead and route this one. So it looks like I do have room to go over the sway bar, so we can do that. All right, and just like last time, got my marker. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this to length, let you know what the length is, then we'll install it. Okay, I've made my second line. This one came in just at 31 inches on the dot, so I'm gonna go ahead and install this guy now. All right, let's grab the light and let's take a look at how I routed this. So obviously I've got both of these guys running down the side there. They're both gonna run over the top there. I'll zip tie them over to the side so that way it's out of the way. And then on this side, as you see, the 60 helps them go around the steering shaft so we don't have any interference. All right, so that's just about all there is to installing the oil cooler. We will be going back and adding the brace on later. But the next steps after this are to make sure that you get your ducting correct. It's nice to have these lines run really close here because we always use the LRB speed under trays for maximum cooling because they're rigid so that they fit right here. We're gonna put a whole bunch of foam stripping over here on the left and right sides of these hoses, and that'll make sure that no air can get past them. It all gets forced into the condenser as well as into the radiator. We'll use that on the sides as well as on the bottom. We don't want to be able to see any light from the front end of the car. And the LRB speed trays are really well made. They're much more rigid than the floppy plastic one from the factory. Won't be showing any of that stuff on this video, but thanks for watching.